Steve Darrow says, in your Texas Turning Purple right angle, you all spoke of California coming to Texans and voting for the same bad policies that messed up California so badly that those same Californians wanted to leave in the first place. Since the vast majority of people don't connect policies with outcomes, good or bad, they don't see the problem with bringing the bad policies with them when they flee the bad outcomes. How do we help people make this connection? Well, that's the trick, isn't it? I think the answer, frankly, is just to basically just tell them. I mean, just tell them, like we just did earlier with the socialism thing. You got to just tell them. The people who consider themselves socialists have never heard the 10 minutes that I did on socialism at the beginning of the show. It's never, ever, ever, ever crossed their minds. And once you tell people these things, they start thinking about it. This is why the left has to control everything and shut down any voices of dissent, because their policies don't make sense, Steve. And people know it. But it's that it's not peer pressure, social proof. It's a social proof that, everybody else believes it. I suppose I should believe it too. However, once you point out to them that this doesn't work and here's why, they're stuck and they have to think about it. And then they start to change their mind. And, I don't know why they make the connection. If I was a Texan, I would be just livid. And if I ever move someplace where I'd like to live, I'm going to decompress as if I'm coming up from a deep depth. If I ever decide to move to northern Idaho, for example, I'm not just going to move to Idaho with my California tags and bear the completely justified hostile stares. I'll move to Nevada. I'll do 6 months in Nevada, and I'll get the Nevada tags, and then I'll go to come up a little bit higher, and I'll go to Utah for another 6 months, and then I'll move into Idaho from Utah. I'll just decompress kind of over the course of a year or two and kind of bleed the California out of people. But California used to be the state that invented everything, and it was the golden state and the richest state, and Reagan was from California, and Reagan was running what was actually free college. Reagan was running what was actually genuinely free college because he was running the state with an efficiency that was generating a surplus. He was running the state as if it was a business. And when you've got an actual surplus, you could argue that the taxes need to go lower, but as long as that tax rate is not too extreme and the economy grows and is humming, then you can take money from people through taxation and give people genuinely free educations instead of the education that they're getting now for free, which is borrowing it from the future, which is either never going to be paid back, and that's going to be a whole can of worms, or it's going to burden them for the next century, them and their children and their children's children, to pay for the stuff that we're spending now. So, I don't know. These places are, I try to explain this to Natasha, how come they take half of what we make here and they don't provide anything. The roads are crap. We don't get, free college or free healthcare, any of these other things that people call free because they're taken out of your paycheck. In Russia, you pay 25% tax or something, and of course it all goes to corrupt officials, but they're the kind of corrupt officials that stay bought, so when you pay your taxes, they take their cut and wet their beaks, but things get done. And when I say get done, I mean they leave you alone till the time they come by and hit you up again. So it's a little tough for me to face the fact that the Russians are taxed at about half of what Americans are taxed at, and they get all the benefits of a high rate of taxation, and we don't. How do I explain that? We're paying half, and we don't forget free schools or free medical care, prepaid, I should say. We don't even get decent roads. The roads in Los Angeles are third world roads, and the place is filthy. And she reminds me of this frequently, and it's embarrassing, and it's disgraceful. If you leave Los Angeles and drive into Orange County, all of a sudden the broken up pavement just goes and it's spotless and it's well manicured and it's well taken care of, and that's because LA County is run by Democrats and Orange County is run by Republicans. So it's not hard to explain. It's just disgraceful and shameful. It's easy to explain. It's easy to explain because it's a gigantic extortion racket. it's a complete extortion racket, and the worst people in the country go into government and become, you know, these pimps. I saw a picture of Maxine Waters, and below that it said poverty pimp. And I thought that's a pretty good term. If you look at some of her the neighborhoods that she represents, it looks like, you know, looks like Nicaragua or El Salvador. Or Zaire. It just doesn't look like it's America. They're in horrible shape. And so people just... So the whole thing ties together, right? So why do people keep voting for people like Maxine Waters and the rest of these Democrats when obviously these Democratic-controlled cities are just pits of murder and poverty? And the answer is, since they control the media, and since the conservatives out there are not willing to pay the way that the liberals are willing to pay for their, you know, the liberals are willing to pay to destroy the country, but we're not willing to pay to save it. So they own the media, they own the information, they own the pop culture, and they convince the people who live in these hellholes that, yes, everything here is terrible, but it'd be much worse if those Republicans got a hold of it. And around and around and around it goes. And guys like me just keep, you know, punching at this wall. Is I don't feel like I have, you know, I'm not allowed to give up. I wouldn't give up. I'm not allowed to leave. I'm chained to this thing, and I don't mean that in a bad way. I'm chained by my own ethical commitment to trying to preserve what's left of this country's freedoms, and I hate injustice, and I hate murder, and I'm motivated to do what I can to stop it. And the people that are doing the murdering are calling themselves angels, and the people they're calling devils are the best people in the world. And I just don't like that, so I keep doing what I'm doing as long as I can.